The supermarket lights buzzed faintly above, casting a sterile glow across polished tiles. Mark sat at a small table tucked into the cafe corner, his laptop open but his focus far away. The spreadsheet numbers blurred together, all victories on paper but hollow in his chest. He straightened his cuffs, a nervous habit that did little to hide the loneliness weighing down on him. Then movement at the checkout counter pulled his attention. A young mother stood there, her coat worn thin against the cold, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion. In one arm she balanced her baby, bundled in a blanket, while her free hand pushed a can of formula toward the cashier. The clerk's expression softened as the woman fumbled through her purse, counting and recounting coins, her lips pressed into a tight line. The pause was brief, but heavy. With a small shake of her head, the mother whispered something, slid the can back, and held her baby closer. The child squirmed, a tiny whimper rising into a soft cry that seemed to echo through the store. Mark felt the sound strike him deeper than any silence he'd endured in his penthouse. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or board meetings, he was staring at someone fighting a quiet battle he could never imagine, and something inside him shifted. The cashier slid the can of formula back across the counter with an apologetic glance, and the young mother's fingers lingered on it for just a second too long, as though letting go meant more than she could bear. Her cheeks flushed with shame, and she quickly shifted her baby higher on her hip, pressing her lips against the child's temple to soothe him. The baby's whimper grew into a weak cry, the kind that pierced through the steady hum of the supermarket and drew curious stares from nearby shoppers. She whispered something softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of apology and desperation, rocking him gently while trying to keep her composure. Mark, watching from across the cafe, felt his chest tighten. It wasn't just the sound of the baby, it was the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears, the way her shoulders curved as though she was carrying the weight of the world alone. He had seen numbers collapse, markets crash, and deals fall apart, but he had never seen quiet dignity break so beautifully, so painfully, in front of him. In that moment, the noise of the store seemed to fade. All Mark could hear was the baby's cry echoing in his mind, pulling him out of the safe, detached bubble he had built around himself for years. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a wealthy CFO, he felt like a man being called to act. Mark rose from his seat before he even realized what he was doing. His polished shoes clicked against the tiles as he crossed the distance to the checkout line, every step steady, purposeful. The mother noticed him approach and instinctively tightened her hold on her baby, her tired eyes wary of yet another stranger witnessing her struggle. The can of formula still sat on the counter, caught in limbo between her need and her inability to pay. Without saying a word, Mark reached into his coat, pulled out his sleek black wallet, and handed his card to the cashier. "I'll take care of it," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. The young woman's eyes widened in disbelief. She shook her head quickly, her voice urgent but strained. "No, please. I can't let you," but he stopped her gently, sliding the receipt toward her once the purchase was done. "This isn't charity," he said softly, his gaze steady but kind. "Think of it as an investment in hope." His words caught in his throat, surprising even himself with the emotion behind them. For a man who had always lived in numbers and transactions, this was the first one that felt meaningful. The mother's lips trembled as she clutched the formula to her chest, her baby now quiet in her arms as though sensing the shift in the air. And for the first time in years, Mark felt a flicker of warmth break through the cold shell he had built around his life. She stood there for a moment, still clutching the formula, as though her mind couldn't quite process what had just happened. Then, slowly, she lifted her eyes to him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but heavy with sincerity. Mark gave a small nod, unsure how to respond, and used a gratitude that wasn't tied to contracts or boardroom victories. They ended up at a small table near the checkout lanes, her baby nestled in her arms and calmer now, while Mark sat across from her, his hands folded awkwardly on the table. The silence at first was thick, but then she began to speak in hesitant fragments. Her name was Anna, she was working 2 jobs, trying to keep a roof over their heads after her husband had left. She had dreams once, of finishing her degree, maybe starting her own business, but life had pushed those dreams so far back they felt like another person's story. Mark listened, really listened, in a way he hadn't done for anyone in years. He found himself studying the way she kept stroking her baby's hair as she talked, the quiet strength it must take to carry so much alone. Somewhere between her words and her pauses, something shifted inside him. He realized he was no longer thinking about quarterly reports or lonely dinners at his penthouse. He was thinking about this woman's courage, her fight to keep moving forward, and how foreign yet grounding it felt to be part of someone's real struggle. For the first time in a long while, he felt more human than his title allowed him to be. Weeks slipped by, but that brief encounter didn't fade into memory, it deepened into something lasting. Mark found himself reaching out to Anna again, at first with small gestures, making sure she had groceries delivered when her shifts ran long, covering the cost of childcare when she had no one else to turn to. Eventually, he offered her part-time work at his company, flexible hours that would allow her to earn steadily while still caring for her baby. She hesitated, pride and fear wrestling in her eyes, but the quiet sincerity in his voice convinced her. This wasn't pity, it was belief. Soon, nights that were once swallowed by silence in Mark's penthouse became filled with new sounds: Anna's laughter over a shared meal, the soft coos of her baby, the clatter of dishes done together. He began to notice how her presence softened the sharp edges of his life, how even the baby's smile could dissolve the cold weight he had carried for years. For Anna, it was more than help. It was a chance to breathe, to dream again, to feel seen not as a burden but as a woman with potential and strength. One evening, as the baby reached for his tie and Anna's laughter filled the room, Mark realized something profound: in trying to save someone else, he had unknowingly saved himself. The once lonely CFO, who had lived in a world of numbers and transactions, now found himself part of a story richer than any deal, one built on kindness, trust, and the fragile but beautiful beginnings of family.